The snow came down like broken glass that night in Seoul. Sharp. Relentless. The kind of cold that doesn't just bite, it devours. Most of the city had retreated indoors hours ago, but Maya Thompson stood in Director Choi's office at 11:30, swaying on her feet like a woman who had forgotten what rest felt like. Her shift had started 14 hours ago. Her coat, thin as paper, still hung damp from the morning sleet. Her stomach had been empty since breakfast. None of that mattered to the man behind the desk. Director Choi shoved a manila envelope into her hands and jabbed one finger toward the door. The Riverside Hotel. VIP client. Deliver this now or clean out your desk in the morning. Maya wanted to scream. Wanted to tell him exactly where he could shove his envelope and his threats and his sadistic little power games. But she had $73 in her account and rent due in 5 days, so she swallowed every word that burned in her throat and nodded. She pushed through the lobby doors into a wall of wind that knocked the breath from her lungs. Snow buried her shoes before she made it 10 feet. The cold wrapped around her ribs like barbed wire. She kept walking because stopping meant dying, and dying meant Director Choi won. She made it 3 blocks. Her legs gave out on the 4th. She hit the pavement hard, ice cracking beneath her knees. The envelope slipped from her fingers. Her vision blurred. Her breath came in shallow, broken gasps that turned to mist and vanished into the storm. Behind the window of the hotel lobby, Director Choi watched her fall. He smiled. Then he turned off the lights and went home. What he didn't know, what his small, cruel mind could never comprehend, was that a black Mercedes had just pulled up to the corner. And the man stepping out of it, his jaw locked tight and his eyes fixed on the woman crumpled in the snow, was Kong Min-jae, head of the Kong Syndicate, the most dangerous man in Seoul. And the woman freezing on the ground was the only woman he had ever loved. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Min-jae was out of the car before his driver could kill the engine. His dress shoes sank into the snow. He didn't feel it. He crossed the distance in 4 strides and dropped to his knees beside her, his hands already reaching, already knowing the shape of her even after 3 years. Maya. Her lips had gone gray. Her body shook so violently it looked like she was seizing. She was clutching that envelope like it was a lifeline, like it mattered more than her own survival, and something inside him shattered. He ripped off his coat and wrapped it around her. His hands moved on instinct, muscle memory from a lifetime ago when holding her had been as natural as breathing. He lifted her from the ice, one arm beneath her knees, the other cradling her back, and the weight of her, lighter than he remembered, made his chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. His driver already had the door open. Min-jae slid into the back seat with Maya still in his arms. Her head fell against his chest. Her breath was faint, but steady. He looked down at her face and felt the crack in his armor widen into a chasm. She looked destroyed. Not just tired. Hollowed out. Like someone had spent years carving pieces from her soul until there was almost nothing left. "Take us home," he said. His voice was calm. His hands, wrapped around her, trembled. The car cut through Seoul in silence. Min-jae didn't move. He held her the entire ride, counting her breaths, feeling her heartbeat against his ribs, and trying not to think about the fact that if he had driven past 1 minute later, she would be dead. They arrived at his penthouse 30 minutes later. His staff moved like shadows, quick and silent. They had seen Min-jae carry wounded men through these doors before. Allies. Enemies. Men who had taken bullets meant for him. But they had never seen him carry a woman. And they had never seen that look on his face. He carried her to the guest room and laid her on the bed. The sheets were ivory silk. The room smelled like lavender and expensive things. A private doctor arrived within 10 minutes, a man who knew better than to ask questions. He checked her vitals, treated the early signs of hypothermia, wrapped her hands in heated blankets, and told Min-jae she would recover by morning. Min-jae sat in the chair beside the bed and didn't leave. Hours passed. The snow kept falling outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Seoul glowed beneath him like a kingdom he ruled but had never truly possessed. He watched Maya sleep the way a man watches something he lost and never expected to find again. Then she opened her eyes. It wasn't gradual. It was violent. Her eyes flew open like a woman trained to wake up ready to fight or run. She sat up fast, breath coming in sharp gasps, her gaze sweeping the room. The silk curtains, the soft lighting, the unfamiliar ceiling. Panic flashed across her face. Then she saw him. Recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her eyes went wide, then narrow, then filled with something worse than anger. Something that looked like grief wrapped in rage and 3 years of unanswered questions. No. She threw the blanket off and swung her legs to the floor, her movements jerky and desperate. No. No, no, no. Maya, don't. Her voice cracked. Don't say my name like that. Don't sit there like you have any right to. She stopped. Her hands were shaking. Not from the cold this time. She looked at the room, at his coat draped over the chair, at the man sitting 3 feet away like he had been waiting for her his entire life. Why am I here? Because you were dying in the snow, Min-jae said quietly. Then you should have kept driving. The words landed like bullets. But his face didn't change. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and looked at her with eyes so dark and unreadable they could have been carved from stone. I almost did, he said. But I made that mistake once. I'm not making it again. Maya stood too fast. Her legs buckled. She grabbed the nightstand to keep from collapsing. Min-jae didn't reach for her. He knew better. He remembered that about her. She would rather fall than accept help she didn't ask for. I need to leave, she said. It's 3 in the morning. There's a blizzard outside. You were hypothermic 2 hours ago. I don't care. Sit down, Maya. His voice didn't rise. It dropped. And that was worse. That was the voice that made entire rooms fall silent. The voice that ended arguments before they began. Maya hated that it still worked on her. Hated even more that her body gave out again, and she had no choice but to sink back onto the bed. Silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. Why were you out there tonight? He asked. She didn't answer. Maya. You were face down in the snow in a coat that couldn't keep a dog warm. So I'm asking you, why? She exhaled through her nose. Her eyes were wet, but nothing fell. My boss, she said quietly. Min-jae didn't move. What about him? He sent me out. There was a delivery. Something for a VIP client. He said if I didn't fix it, I was fired. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just bitterness sharp enough to cut. He didn't even give me cab fare. Just shoved an envelope at me and told me not to come back if I failed. Min-jae's expression didn't change. His posture didn't shift. But something behind his eyes went very, very still. The kind of still that came before violence. He watched you leave, Maya continued. Her voice had gone flat. The way people speak when they've told a story so many times it stops hurting. He stood at the window and watched me walk into the blizzard. He knew what he was doing. She paused. This isn't the first time. Min-jae's fingers curled slowly against his knee. What do you mean? Maya looked away. He's been doing this for months. Impossible task. Cutting my hours. Blaming me for things I didn't do. Screaming at me in front of clients. Making sure everyone knows I'm disposable. She swallowed hard. Last week, he made me stand outside in the rain for an hour because I brought him the wrong tea. I stood there holding a tray until he decided I'd learned my lesson. The room was warm, but something in it had turned ice cold. And it was coming from Min-jae. What is his name? Min-jae said. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. It shouldn't. This isn't your life anymore. I'm not your... She stopped herself before the word came out. But they both heard it anyway. She wasn't his anything. That was the whole point. That was why she left. Min-jae stood slowly. He walked to the window and looked out over Seoul. The snow was still falling. The city beneath him slept, unaware. He pressed one hand flat against the cold glass. "You're staying here tonight," he said without turning around. "Tomorrow, I'll have someone bring your things." "I'm not staying with you, Min-jae. You're not going back to that man either. You don't get to decide that." He turned then. His face was calm. His eyes were not. They held something patient and terrible. The look of a man who had already made a decision and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. "No," he said quietly. "I don't. But I promise you this. He will never send you into the cold again." It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. And they both knew it. Maya didn't sleep. She lay in that bed with the silk sheets and the warm air and the soft hum of a heater that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent, and she stared at the ceiling like it was pressing down on her. Being in Min-jae's space again felt like stepping back into a dream she had spent 3 years trying to wake up from. She remembered the first time she met him. She was 25, teaching English at a language academy in Itaewon because she wanted adventure and didn't understand that adventure and danger were often the same thing. He walked into the coffee shop where she was grading papers. Black suit.
No smile.
Eyes that looked like they had seen the kind of things most people only heard about in whispers. He ordered an Americano and sat across the room without saying a word. But he came back the next day. And the day after that. Every day for 2 weeks until she finally looked up and said, "Are you going to talk to me or just keep staring?" He almost smiled. Almost. And that almost destroyed her. What followed was 6 months of fire. He took her to places she had never imagined. Private rooftops overlooking the Han River. Restaurants with no signs and waiters who bowed when he entered. Rooms where men twice his age asked for his permission before they spoke. She didn't understand his world at first. She thought he was a businessman. Someone important but legitimate. By the time she understood what he really was, she was already drowning in him. And that was the trap. Not his power. Not his money. The way he looked at her when no one else was watching. Like she was the only soft thing in a life made entirely of sharp edges. He would hold her face in both hands and press his forehead to hers and breathe like she was the only air he needed. He told her things he had never told anyone. About his father. About the empire he inherited at 19. About the blood on his hands that no amount of soap could wash clean. And she held all of it. Every broken piece. She held it because she loved him. Because she believed love was enough. It wasn't. The night everything ended, there was an ambush. Min-jae's enemies moved on one of his operations, and Maya was in the building. She wasn't supposed to be there. She had come to surprise him. Instead, she walked into gunfire and shattered glass and men shouting in Korean, and Min-jae standing in the middle of it all with blood on his shirt and a gun in his hand. He looked at her, and she saw it. The moment he decided. Not anger. Not fear.
Certainty.
He grabbed her arm, shoved her into a car, and the last thing he said was, "Don't come back." She waited for him to call. He never did. She waited for an explanation. It never came. She packed her things, flew back to the States, and spent 2 years rebuilding herself from nothing. Then she came back to Seoul. Because she was stubborn. Or stupid. Or maybe because some part of her was still waiting for him to walk through a door and say he was sorry. He never did. Until tonight. By morning, the snow had slowed. Maya got dressed in silence. She folded Min-jae's coat neatly on the chair. She found her shoes by the door. She made it to the hallway before his voice stopped her. "Where are you going?" He was leaning against the wall at the end of the corridor, arms crossed. He looked like he hadn't slept either.
"Home," she said.
"You collapsed in the street 8 hours ago.
And you saved me.
Thank you. Now let me go."
No.
She turned fully. "You don't get to do this, Min-jae. You don't get to throw me away and then hold on. That's not how this works." He pushed off the wall and walked toward her slowly. He stopped close enough that she could smell his cologne. The same one from 3 years ago. and something inside her chest split open.
You're right, he said.
I threw you away, and it was the worst thing I've ever done. But I'm not letting you walk back to a man who leaves you in the snow to die. That's not your choice. Then make a better one. She stared at him.
He stared back.
Neither moved, and the silence between them said everything 3 years of distance never could. Maya stayed. She told herself it was because her apartment had no heat and her body still ached from the cold. She told herself it was practical, temporary. She told herself a lot of things that first morning, sitting at Min-jae's kitchen counter drinking tea from a cup that probably cost more than her weekly paycheck. None of them were true, but they kept her from falling apart, so she held on. Min-jae left early.
He didn't say where.
He never did, but he told his staff to make sure she had everything she needed. And he told his driver to stay in case she wanted to go anywhere. He said it casually, like a man offering a guest a glass of water. But Maya noticed the 2 men stationed by the elevator. She noticed the security cameras. She noticed the way no one in the building looked her in the eye, because they were all too busy looking at Min-jae. She was in his world again. And his world had eyes everywhere. By afternoon, the first rumor had already started. It began in a restaurant in Gangnam, where one of Min-jae's lieutenants mentioned casually that the boss had brought a woman home. Not a Korean woman. A foreigner. Black. Beautiful. The kind of woman Min-jae had never been seen with before. By evening, the whisper had reached the ears of people who had been waiting a long time for Min-jae to show a weakness. Baek Ji-hoon heard it first. He ran the second largest syndicate in the city and had hated Min-jae since the day Min-jae's father destroyed his uncle's operation 20 years ago. He sat in his office, rolling a coin between his fingers, and smiled when his man delivered the news. A woman, Baek said. In his penthouse. Foreign.
No connections.
No family here.
He leaned back.
Interesting. Find out who she is.
Find out what she means to him.
And find out how much it would hurt him to lose her. Maya didn't know any of this, but she felt it. It started as a prickling at the back of her neck when she stood by the window. A tightness in her chest when she noticed the same black SUV parked across the street for too long. A feeling she remembered from 3 years ago. The feeling of being watched by people who didn't wish her well. She was folding a blanket in the guest room when Min-jae came home that evening. He walked in quietly, the way he always did, like a man who had learned to move without making sound. But she saw the tension in his jaw, the tightness around his eyes. Something had happened today. Something he wasn't going to tell her. People know I'm here, she said. It wasn't a question. Min-jae set his keys on the counter. It's handled. That's not what I asked. He looked at her. That long, steady look that used to make her feel safe and now made her feel trapped. Some people are asking questions. It doesn't concern you. It concerns me if I'm the question, Min-jae. He didn't answer right away. He loosened his tie and poured himself a drink. His movements were controlled. But Maya had learned a long time ago to read what lived beneath his control. He was angry. Not at her. At something bigger. Something moving in the shadows that she couldn't see yet but could feel, the way animals feel a storm before it arrives. I told you, he said finally. You're safe here. You told me that 3 years ago, too. The glass stopped halfway to his lips. He set it down slowly. The silence between them filled with ghosts. Gunfire. Broken glass. The last words he ever said to her before she disappeared.
This is different, he said. How?
He looked at her, and the answer sat in his eyes, raw and unguarded, for exactly 1 second before he locked it away again. Because this time, I'm not letting you leave. It happened in small moments. Not grand gestures. Not declarations. Just the quiet, dangerous undoing of 2 people who had spent 3 years pretending they didn't still carry each other under their skin. The first morning, Maya came into the kitchen and found Min-jae standing at the stove. He had his sleeves rolled to his elbows.
No sudyakit.
No guards in a room. Just a man cracking eggs into a pan like it was the most natural thing in the world. She stopped in the doorway and stared, because the image didn't fit. The most feared man in Seoul, standing barefoot on heated tile, making breakfast. "You don't have staff for that?" she asked. "I sent them away."
Why?
He didn't look up. "Because you don't like being surrounded by strangers. You never did." The fact that he remembered that, something she had mentioned once 3 years ago in passing, hit her harder than she was prepared for. She sat down and said nothing. He placed a plate in front of her.
Rice, eggs, soup,
Sliced fruit, arranged the way Korean mothers do it, with care that doesn't ask for credit. She ate every bite, and hated herself for how good it felt. The second moment came 2 days later. Min-jae came home late. She heard the door open around midnight and almost didn't get up. But something made her walk to the living room. He was sitting on the couch in the dark, his jacket thrown over the armrest. His right hand was wrapped in a cloth that was slowly turning red. "What happened?"
she said.
"Nothing. You're bleeding." "It's handled." She stood there for a long moment, caught between the woman she was now, the one who owed him nothing, and the woman she used to be, the one who couldn't stand to see him hurt. The old version one. She went to the bathroom, found the first aid kit, and came back without a word. She sat beside him on the couch and unwrapped the cloth. The cut ran across his knuckles. Deep but clean. The kind of wound that comes from hitting something or someone with precision.
She didn't ask.
He didn't explain. She cleaned the cut with antiseptic. He didn't flinch. She wrapped the gauze slowly, carefully, the way she used to when they were together, and he would come home carrying injuries he never explained. And she would patch him up in silence, because words would have made it too real. Her fingers moved over his hand, and she felt him go still. Not tense.
Still.
The kind of stillness that meant he was holding something back with everything he had. She tied off the bandage and looked up. He was watching her.
Close.
Too close. His eyes moved over her face the way a man reads something sacred. Slowly. With reverence. Afraid to miss a single word. Her breath caught. The room was dark and warm and quiet, and his hand was still in hers, and she could feel his pulse against her fingertips.
Steady. Strong.
And for one terrible moment, she wanted to press her lips to his knuckles and tell him she never stopped. She pulled away, stood up,
Took a step back.
"You should be more careful," she said. Her voice was steady.
Her hands were not. "I know," he said.
But he wasn't talking about the cut. After that, the silences between them changed. They were no longer cold. They were heavy, unfulfilled. He would pour her tea, and their fingers would brush, and neither would acknowledge it. She would fall asleep on the couch reading and wake up with a blanket over her that she didn't remember pulling. He would stand in the doorway of her room to say good night and linger 1 second too long. And she would feel that second in her chest for hours. They didn't touch. They didn't talk about it. But something was building between them, slow and inevitable, like a fire that starts with smoke long before the flame. And both of them knew it was only a matter of time before one of them broke. It had been 6 days since the snowstorm. 6 days since Maya collapsed on the ice. 6 days since Min-jae carried her into a life she had sworn she would never re-enter. The snow had softened. What was once a blizzard had become a quiet, steady fall. The kind that made Seoul look like a painting, white and still and almost peaceful. Maya was standing by the window when Min-jae came home that evening. She had been standing there a lot lately, watching the snow, watching the city move beneath her, watching her own reflection and trying to recognize the woman staring back. She didn't hear him come in. She never did. He moved like smoke. "Come with me," he said. She turned. He was standing by the door, still in his coat. He hadn't taken off his shoes. That was unusual. Min-jae was meticulous about his face. Everything in its place. Everything controlled. "Where?" she asked. "Outside." She almost laughed. You're joking. I'm not. Min-jae, the last time I was outside in the snow, I nearly died. I know. That's why we're going. She didn't understand. But something in his voice, not a command, not a request, something closer to a plea disguised as calm, made her move toward the door. He opened the closet and pulled out a coat she had never seen before. Long black, cashmere, heavy enough to stop the cold dead. It wasn't his. It was her size. He had bought it for her.
She didn't know when. She didn't ask.
She just stood there as he held it open behind her, the way a man holds a door. Not because she couldn't do it herself, but because he wanted to be the one. She slid her arms in. The fabric was warm and soft, and it smelled new, but somehow it also smelled like him. Like cedar and smoke and something she couldn't name, but had never forgotten. He lifted her hair out from under the collar.
Gently.
His fingers barely brushed the back of her neck, and the touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. Then he pulled a scarf from the shelf. Dark gray. Thick wool. He wrapped it around her neck slowly, his hands working close to her jaw, and she held her breath because he was so close she could see the small scar beneath his left eye. The one he got the night everything fell apart. He tucked the ends of the scarf into the coat and stepped back, looking at her the way an artist looks at something finished. Not with pride, with tenderness. Now you're ready, he said quietly. They took the elevator down and walked out through a side entrance she hadn't known existed. The cold hit her face, but it didn't reach her body. The coat held everything out. Min-jae walked beside her, hands in his pockets, his breath making clouds in the air. He didn't try to hold her hand. He didn't guide her with a touch on her back. He just walked with her, matching her pace, letting her lead.
They didn't talk for a long time.
They walked through a small park near the building where the trees were heavy with snow and the streetlights turned everything amber. Their footsteps crunched in unison. The city hummed somewhere far away. But here, it was just them and the snow and the quiet. Maya stopped beneath a tree. A branch above her released a small shower of snow that dusted her shoulders. She looked up at it, and for the first time in days, maybe months, maybe years, she smiled.
Small, brief, real.
Min-jae saw it. He didn't say anything, but he looked away quickly, like a man who had just seen something so beautiful it physically hurt and needed a moment to recover. Thank you, Maya said softly. For the coat? It's just a coat.
No, it isn't.
He looked at her. She looked at him. The snow fell between them like a curtain. Neither was ready to pull back, but it was thinner now. Whatever wall she had built was cracking. Not from force, from care, from the quiet, steady presence of a man who was not trying to win her, but simply refusing to let her freeze in any sense of the word.
No, he admitted.
It isn't. They stood there a moment longer. Then they walked back, side by side, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Almost. And that almost meant everything. It was the 9th night. Maya was sitting on the floor by the window in the guest room, her knees pulled to her chest, watching the snow fall in the dark. She couldn't sleep. She hadn't been able to sleep properly since the walk in the park. Something had shifted that night, and she couldn't shift it back. The wall she had built was no longer cracking. It was crumbling, and she didn't know what would be left of her once it came down. She heard the knock.
Soft.
One knuckle. She knew it was him, because no one else in the penthouse would dare come to her door at this hour.
It's open, she said.
Min-jae stepped in. He was in a black t-shirt and loose pants.
No suit. No armor.
He looked more human than she had seen him in years. And that terrified her more than the Mafia boss version ever could. He sat on the floor across from her, his back against the opposite wall. And for a long time, neither of them spoke. The room was lit only by the city glow coming through the glass. It made shadows of both of them. I need to tell you something, he said. You don't owe me anything, Min-jae. I owe you everything. His voice was low, not sharp, not commanding, just honest in a way that made her chest ache. "I owe you the truth. I should have given it to you 3 years ago, but I was too afraid. And I need you to hear it now before this goes any further." She didn't say anything. She just looked at him and waited. He exhaled slowly. His eyes dropped to his hands. The hands she had bandaged 3 nights ago. The hands that had held her in the snow. The hands that once held her face like she was made of something precious and breakable. "The night of the ambush," he began. "When you came to the building and walked into the middle of it, I didn't send you away because I was angry." He paused. "I sent you away because they were coming for you." Maya's breath stopped. Baek Ji-hoon's men. They had been watching us for weeks. They knew about you. They knew what you meant to me. And that night, the ambush wasn't just an attack on my operation. It was a message. He looked up at her. "They put a photograph on my desk before the shooting started.
It was you, Maya.
Walking to the academy. Sitting in the park. Sleeping in my bed. Through the window." His jaw tightened. "They were going to take you. Use you.
Destroy you."
To destroy me." Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the floor to stop them. "I had 2 choices," Min-jae said. "Keep you close and watch them hunt you, or push you so far away that they would believe you meant nothing to me." He looked at her, and his eyes were wet. She had never seen that before. Not once. Not in 6 months of love and danger and fire. "So I chose. I made you hate me, because your hatred kept you alive." The silence that followed was unbearable. It pressed against the walls. It filled the space between them like water rising in a room with no exit. "You could have told me," Maya whispered. Her voice broke on the last word. "If I told you, you would have stayed." "Yes. And they would have killed you." "You don't know that." "I do." His voice cracked for the first time. "It cracked because they killed the last person I loved before you. My mother. The same way. The same people. I watched it happen when I was 17 years old. And I swore I would never let it happen again." Maya's hand came up to her mouth. A sound escaped her that she couldn't control. Not a sob. Something deeper. Something that had been buried for 3 years under anger and abandonment and the belief that she had been thrown away by a man who simply didn't care enough to keep her. He did care. He cared so much it almost killed them both. "I'm sorry," Min-jae said. The words sounded like they had been sitting in his throat for half a decade, waiting. "I'm sorry. I didn't fight harder to find another way. I'm sorry I let you believe you weren't enough. You were everything, Maya. You were the only thing that ever made me want to be something other than what my father made me." Tears ran down her face. She didn't wipe them. She couldn't move. She sat there on the floor of a room that wasn't hers, in a life that wasn't hers, looking at a man who had broken her heart to save her life. And she felt every wall she had ever built collapse at once. She didn't go to him. Not yet. But she didn't look away either. And when she finally spoke, her voice was small and raw and honest in a way she hadn't allowed herself to be in years. "I never stopped loving you," she said. "And I hated myself for it every single day." Min-jae closed his eyes. A tear fell. He didn't wipe it either. "I know," he said. "Because neither did I." Min-jae moved in silence. That was how he had always operated. Not with noise. Not with spectacle. With precision. The kind that left no fingerprints but made sure everyone knew exactly who was responsible. It took him 3 days. 3 days to dismantle everything Director Choi had built. The first day, Min-jae's lawyers filed 17 labor violation complaints against the hotel. Every unpaid overtime hour. Every illegal deduction from Maya's salary. Every instance of workplace endangerment documented by security footage Min-jae's people had already obtained. The complaints landed on the desks of 4 government agencies simultaneously. By noon, the hotel's parent company's stock had dropped 6%. The second day, Min-jae made a phone call to the CEO of the luxury conglomerate that supplied 80% of the hotel's premium amenities. By evening, The supply contract was terminated. No explanation given. No negotiation offered. Just a polite email that said the partnership no longer aligned with their brand values. Director Choi called every contact he had, trying to understand what happened. No one returned his calls. No one ever would again. The third day was personal. Min Jae released records, legally obtained, carefully curated, showing that Director Choi had been embezzling funds for 18 months, skimming deposits, falsifying invoices, redirecting payments into offshore accounts he thought no one could trace. Min Jae's forensic accountants traced them in 36 hours. The documents were delivered to a financial crimes prosecutor who owed Min Jae nothing but respected him enough to act quickly. By sundown, there was a warrant. Maya watched it unfold from the penthouse. She saw the news alerts on her phone. She saw her former colleagues posting in group chats.
Panicked, confused,
Scrambling. She saw Director Choi's name on a headline, and she felt something she didn't expect. Not satisfaction. Not relief. Anger. The kind that doesn't explode but rises slowly, hot and steady, until it demands to be used. I want to go there, she told Min Jae. He looked at her. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. He studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't try to protect her from this. He handed her the car keys and stepped aside. Maya walked into that hotel building for the last time, wearing the black cashmere coat Min Jae had given her. Director Choi was at his desk, surrounded by lawyers and panic. His face was gray, with the understanding that his world was ending. He looked up when she entered. For a moment, he didn't even recognize her. She looked different. She stood different. The woman who had stumbled out into the blizzard holding his envelope was gone.
You sent me out to die, she said.
Her voice was steady.
Clear.
The entire room went quiet.
You humiliated me. You starved me.
You made me believe I was nothing. She placed her employee badge on his desk. But I'm standing here, and you're sitting there, and we both know how this ends. She turned and walked out. She didn't look back. She was halfway to the car when the first gunshot shattered the window of the building across the street. Everything happened fast. Min Jae's driver pulled her to the ground. Glass rained onto the pavement. People screamed. 2 more shots cracked through the air. Precise. Deliberate. Aimed not at the building but at the black sedan parked at the curb. Min Jae's car. The car she had just been walking toward. Baek Ji-hoon had made his move. Min Jae's guards surrounded her within seconds. She was shoved into an armored vehicle she hadn't even seen parked nearby and driven at speed through streets she didn't recognize. Her ears were ringing. Her hands were shaking. Blood from a small cut on her forehead ran into her eye. When they arrived at a safe house on the outskirts of Seoul, Min Jae was already there. He grabbed her by the shoulders and looked at her face. At the blood. At the cut. And something in his expression broke open. Not rage. Not control. Raw, unfiltered fear. Are you hurt?
He said. His voice was wrecked. I'm fine.
You're bleeding, Maya.
I'm fine.
He pulled her into his arms, so hard it knocked the air from her lungs. He held her against his chest, and she felt his heart hammering beneath his ribs.
Wild.
Desperate. And she realized that the most powerful man in Seoul was terrified. Not of his enemies. Not of bullets. Of losing her again. I can't do this twice, he whispered into her hair. I can't lose you twice. She wrapped her arms around him and held on. And this time she didn't let go. They stayed in the safe house for 2 days. 2 days of locked doors and armed guards and the sound of Min Jae on the phone, speaking in Korean so fast and so low that Maya couldn't follow even the words she knew. She didn't ask what was happening. She could see it in his face. He was at war. And for the first time, she understood that this war was not about territory or money or power. It was about her. On the second night, Min Jae ended a call and stood in the doorway of the small bedroom where Maya was sitting on the edge of the bed. He looked exhausted. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. The kind that lives in your bones when you've been carrying something too heavy for too long.
It's done, he said.
Baek Ji-hoon has been dealt with. His operation is finished. His men have scattered. He paused. You're safe. She nodded, but she could see there was more. Something sitting behind his eyes that he hadn't said yet. I've been thinking, he continued. He stepped into the room and sat beside her. Not close. Not far. The exact distance of a man who was about to offer something and was terrified it would be refused. About what happens now. He looked at his hands. I've spent my entire life building something my father started. An empire I never asked for. A name that people fear because fear was the only currency my family ever understood.
He paused.
I told myself it was legacy, duty,
Honor.
but the truth is I held on to it because I didn't have anything else worth holding. He turned to her. Until you. Maya felt her throat tighten. I'm stepping back, he said. Not out. I can't disappear completely. But I'm handing operations to my second. Restructuring. Moving the business into legitimate channels. It will take time. It won't be clean. But I'm doing it. He exhaled. Because I can't keep you safe in a world built on violence. And keeping you safe matters more to me than keeping power. She stared at him. The man who controlled half of Seoul. The man whose name made people look over their shoulders. Sitting on the edge of a bed in a safe house. Offering to dismantle everything he was. For her. Min Jae, I'm not asking you to stay, he said. I'm telling you what I'm choosing. Whether you're beside me or not, this is what I'm choosing. Because you showed me there's a version of my life that doesn't have to look like my father's. And I want that version. Even if I have to build it alone. The room was quiet. The guards outside were silent. The world outside the window was dark and cold and still. Maya looked at this man who had broken her heart to save her life. Who had carried her from the snow. Who had wrapped her in a coat like a promise. Who had destroyed her enemy without raising his voice. And who was now willing to burn his kingdom down because she was worth more than the throne. She didn't answer right away. Because this was the moment she had been building toward. Not just in the last 9 days. But in the last 3 years. Every night she spent alone. Every morning she forced herself to get up. Every time she swallowed her pain and kept moving. It was all leading here. To this choice. She chose herself first. She had to. She closed her eyes and felt the woman she had been before Min Jae, before the snow, before the abuse, before the heartbreak, rise up inside her like something that had been sleeping and was finally ready to wake. She was enough. With or without him.
She knew that now.
Then she opened her eyes. And she chose him, too. She reached over and took his hand. The one she had bandaged. The one that had lifted her from the ice. She laced her fingers through his and held on.
I'm not going anywhere, she said.
Min Jae looked at their hands. Then at her. And for the first time since she had known him, not halfway, not hidden behind control, he smiled. They left the safe house the next morning. Together. The snow had finally stopped. The streets of Seoul glistened under pale winter sunlight. Min Jae opened the car door for her, and she stepped in without hesitation. He slid in beside her, and their shoulders touched.
Not almost this time.
Fully. And neither of them pulled away. The car pulled into the road. The city stretched ahead of them, wide and bright and waiting. Behind them, the snow was already melting. Ahead of them, something new was beginning. Something built not on fear or power or pain, but on the quiet, stubborn, impossible survival of two people who loved each other enough to try again. And this time they were ready. If this story touched your heart, if you felt every heartbeat, every snowfall, every moment Maya and Min Jae breathed for each other, then don't let this be the end. Hit that like button, share this with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe because we have more stories that will make you believe love can survive anything. Drop a comment and tell us what you felt. We read every single one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing with us. See you in the next story.
Blue Heart.